Okay guys, welcome to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode I take a look at the 2017 film Flatliners. It has a 4% on the tomato meter and a 33% on the audience score. It's certainly rotten. It is a remake of a film which is also considered rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. This one has 11,000 plus audience reviews, so it's not that popular, but it's certainly not completely forgotten. And this film is currently running on HBO as of December of 2019, sporadically appearing. It has 33% on the audience score, and I think that that's fair. Actually, it could sink lower. If it were 23% on the audience score, that would still be fair. The critics are at 4%, and I can't account for the critics, but I've seen the critics rate things like this much higher. But 4%, well, yeah, there's not a whole lot redeemable about this. In fact, this is actually marketed as some kind of supernatural thriller, and what you have is a very dull and boring story and somewhat illogical story of a group of medical students or interns that decide that they are going to kill themselves for up to 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes at a time and get some kind of experience and some kind of data out of this. And the movie just turns into, the story becomes that these students, they give up trying to find any kind of data in this, and they just enjoy the experience of being dead for a minute or two and believe that it comes to enhance their mental abilities, enhance their ability to study for their exams. And it's really quite stupid, illogical, and pointless. And the biggest fail right off the bat on this thing is that these medical students that were introduced to at the beginning of the film, they're completely unlikable, and they are possessed of all the cliches that frat boy students would be possessed of, and they're very stupid for medical students, and they all have very cardboard cutout personal problems and sexual obsessions, and it's very hard to believe that they're actually smart enough in any way to be actual medical students or interns. And so it's just hard to like them at all. You don't sympathize with them. You actually want to see them die and not wake up from their flatline experiences. And so it's just really hard to get into. And story-wise, it's kind of teased that there are supernatural things going on as a result of them being dead for these small amounts of time. But then later it's just revealed that it's all in their head, it's hallucinations, and when they've harmed themselves, it's just they've done this to themselves without realizing it, and there aren't actual ghosts or anything like that involved. And it's a little bit different than the original movie. Now, the original movie from 1990, it was better. It was a lot better. The characters were much better. The suspense was better. The production quality was better, even taking into account that it's 1990. And it had big name stars. It had Julia Roberts, it had Kiefer Sutherland, it had Kevin Bacon, and several others, big name stars of the time, certainly big name stars today. And it did the best with those stars, and it just it comes in a hair under being, out of the rotten territory at 59%. Back in the day, I remember seeing it when it came out on HBO or Showtime, and I sat through it and I kind of enjoyed it, but I would have considered it like a not so great film. It wasn't something that I wanted to see twice, and I largely forgot about it. Now this one from 2017, it's just a straight up complete fail as a remake. There are no name brand stars. In fact, the only one I recognized is I saw him in Star Wars Rogue One, and that would be, scrolling down to remember, that would be Diego Luna. Now, Diego Luna is probably the most recognized out of this bunch of medical students, and Ellen Page I could put in the secondary category as second most recognizable. Neither one of them do anything for this story. They could have been replaced with other people. It wouldn't have made any difference because their characters were completely unlikable. Now, I'll say all the actors, they do decent acting jobs, passable jobs, but they're just so unlikable. You just actually want to see them kind of die off, and only one or two of them actually do. Now, what's interesting is Kiefer Sutherland actually he plays a role in this film as a hospital staff, a teaching faculty member of this hospital staff that's the overseer of these interns. And he doesn't have a lot to do, but he's definitely in his role, and he's older. He's portrayed as older, and he walks with a cane. And I don't know, he's not a plus or a minus to this film. He's just there, and he's there as a callback to the original, because the original from 1990s, it features a much younger Kiefer Sutherland. You can see here in the cast photos. And yeah, he's just there to have name recognition as a callback, I suppose. But I think that's pretty much a fail, because the younger generation, the millennials, they probably haven't even seen the original film. So Kiefer Sutherland wouldn't mean anything to them as any kind of callback, so that's a fail. Anyway, let's get right into the audience reviews on this. We have the latest one from September 29, 2019, about 3 months ago now. 3 stars. I enjoyed it for what it was. Good acting, trying to navigate through a plot that wasn't quite sure where it was going. Um, I'll disagree and say this is simply 1 star. I want to give it half a star, but I actually sat through the whole thing, so I'll give it 1 star, because, as this reviewer said, the movie plot couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Was there going to be some kind of supernatural aspect to this? It is like the plot couldn't figure it out itself, and so I wasn't quite sure, so I just stuck through this thing to see if they actually did try to spring some kind of supernatural twist at the end, and no, they did not. And I'll say 1 star because they got me to watch the whole thing. Otherwise, I would just give this half a star. But I'm only going to be reading 3-star and below reviews, because 4 and 5-star reviews, I've skimmed a few of them, and they don't help our cause any. They just confuse matters, because you have 4 and 5-star reviewers on this film talking this film down, pretty much trashing it, but still leaving it 4 and 5 stars. So I'm not going to try to figure out why that is. I'm just not going to read them. 1 star, September 17. The acting is trash. The jump scares are trash. This whole movie is trash. Stay away. Yeah, there are several scenes that try to give you jump scares like a horror movie would do, and it doesn't work at all. It didn't even slightly jump scare me. I don't know why, they just weren't done well. And then it also doesn't fit, because this is not a horror film at all, and yet it tries to do some jump scares. The medical students, after they go through their flatliner experiences, they're dead for a minute or two. When they go back to their everyday lives, so to speak, they have a couple of jump scares when they're by themselves in their dorm rooms or their apartments or whatnot. It doesn't work, and it doesn't fit, because there's no supernatural horror element to be scared of. Everything's in their mind. It's all hallucinations, and it's not even scary in that regard. It's a complete fail. 2 stars, September 11. Not the best movie, but the girls in this movie look good. That's debatable. They try to put sex scenes in this, and I know that's kind of a callback to the 1990 film, because the 1990 film actually had a Baldwin brother. He was in that as a character that was kind of sex obsessed and was making secret sex tapes of his girlfriends, and that was part of a side plot in the original film. This one doesn't go that far, but the characters are pretty much eager to just have sex with each other, especially after they've been dead. It's shown that after 2 of them come back from their death, very short death experiences, the first thing they want to do is they're like completely horny, so they want to go have sex, and they want to go out to the club. All these characters, after they have their flatliner experiences, the first thing they want to do, if it's not sex, it's go out to the club and just drink themselves silly. And then it's shown that somehow they become super smart. At least some of them become super smart and able to ace their medical exams and whatnot, whereas before they were struggling and couldn't concentrate. And this movie's all over the place. It doesn't seem to have a message. It kind of tries to tell you that They're getting some kind of superhuman abilities from these death experiences. It kind of teases that, but doesn't go all the way. And then it kind of shifts gears and tries to tell you that they're having guilt trips and that things that they did in their past that they feel guilty about are coming back to haunt them because of their 1 or 2 minute death experiences. It doesn't quite know what it's trying to tell the audience. You get a couple of conflicting things out of this, and at the very end of this film, you don't get an actual message. If there was an attempt at a message, it's completely lost, and it's just it's all over the place. Theme-wise, there isn't one. It's a complete boring waste of time, so I agree on the 1 star. 2 stars. September 11, they're saying that, well, they're giving it an extra star, I guess, because they say the girls look good. Well, not really. They're okay, but by movie standards, the girls aren't anything to look at. You're not going to get any, nude scenes or anything in this that are going to be worth sitting through this. And the girls aren't all that anyway. Half a star, September 4th, 2019. Ago, the only good thing I can say on my viewing experience of Flatliners is that at least I didn't use any money to purchase the tickets and instead used scene points to get a free ticket. Not only was there no psychological scares and was a slog to watch through, but since I saw the original, the plot line is pretty much contradictory, and the inclusion of Kiefer Sutherland's character felt like a gimmick to attract fans of the original. Yeah, exactly. Kiefer Sutherland, he had very little role in this. He just showed up as pretty much a gimmick to get people that remember the 1990 film to think it was worth seeing. I don't know, but it didn't work. It wasn't even a good callback. He might have worked as a cameo if he had something to do in one scene, but there was no scene where he had anything to do. He was just there to put his name on it somehow in the credits. And I've made a little list. One of the first flaws of this film is that it opens actually 9 years before the rest of the film, and it opens with having this main character and this main female medical student character. We're supposed to follow along with her because she's the main character. Now we start with her and she's driving her younger sister somewhere and they have a car accident and her younger sister is killed. And then we get the big words on the screen that say 9 years later, and then we open and she's a medical student and she's like an intern at this hospital, and she's obsessed with finding out about why people in a medical sense have these after-death experiences that they report. Well, the movie starts off that way, and then about halfway through the film or less, it kills her off. She's actually the character that dies off. And then that kind of kills off the whole thing that was driving the plot forward. And we had this plot where basically she wanted to flatline herself and other medical students in these secret experiments in the basement of this hospital for the purpose of collecting medical data so that she could become famous for unlocking the secret of after-death experiences. Well, unfortunately, it kills her off, and then the rest of the students just go through with these experiments without her for the purpose of just like enhancing their study abilities and, almost like experimenting with mind-altering drugs. It's just an experience for them, and we forget all about this data, and it kind of kills that whole thing. That whole plot vehicle is just killed off, and that kind of kills off a lot of the interest we had at the beginning of this film, and that's a big mistake in the plot because it doesn't replace that story, that driving plot with anything else, and so that's when the movie just kind of meanders all over the place and becomes really boring. Why they chose to kill off the driving character and the driving motivation of the plot, I don't know. It's something that a film student would know better to do, but that's where this director went, and it really produced a crap film. And half a star, I can actually agree with that in a lot of ways because a movie was made and people got paid, and Kiefer got paid, right? So that's worth half a star. But also on my list, all the medical students are pretty much incompetent. Again, I said that at the beginning. It's hard to believe that they're actually interns in a hospital, that they didn't already flunk out of medical school, because there's only one of these students that seems to know what he's doing most of the time, and the rest of them can barely get through their exams and study. And I don't even know why they're allowed to work in a hospital, because it's like they're completely incompetent, and I wouldn't want them around me if I were in that hospital as a patient. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It makes this film rotten because it logically fails in that regard. Um, August 26, 2019, half a star. Had to switch off junk, stick with the original. Yeah, once you get to the parts where people are having what are either hallucinations, or it's teasing you that they could be some kind of hauntings from the spirit world that doesn't go anywhere, you just kind of want to shut it off, because you're not even sure what the point of it all is. It just kind of goes, almost goes in certain directions, and then just doesn't go anywhere. And it's not even that thrilling to see these after-death experiences. There's the first opening story medical student, the one that gets killed. She has her, she's the first one to experience an after-death experience, a flatline experience. And the movie had some kind of a budget to show some CGI effects with her on this bridge and seeing all these colored lights, and you don't know if they're spirits or what the hell she's looking at. And then that's the only interesting thing, was there for just a few seconds. And most of these flatline experiences from the other characters after that were just like them wandering around or driving through city streets or riding a motorcycle through the streets at night, and there wasn't anything worth watching in it. Nothing scary, nothing good to look at, nothing supernatural, nothing. Just boring, like the most boring dream sequences you could possibly imagine. That's what they used to show you these flatline experiments. And there were several parts of the movie where I was just wondering, why would these smart medical students, if that's what they were supposed to be, why would they risk death to get such boring dream experiences that they could get just by smoking a joint or popping a pill and just taking a nap for an hour? Why would they kill themselves just to get these boring dream sequences? Like, it was really hard to believe that even incompetent medical students, or anybody for that matter with half a brain, would want to risk death to get almost nothing out of it, or to get out of it what we saw, which was very boring. It was very hard to just believe all this stuff going on. Yeah, 1 star, July 8, 2019. This is not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. Norton's character is cringe. I did enjoy Clement's portrayal of a shy, naive girl with a wild side buried deep. It just wasn't enough to save this feature. Yeah, there wasn't anything interesting about these characters. Like, it didn't matter if they were believable or not on top of it, because nothing happened in this film that was remotely interesting. All they did was basically have some semi-pleasant dreams, and then they had some not-so-pleasant hallucinations, and then at the end, they all just got together and finished the movie off at a bar drinking. And you know how I mentioned that the whole thing about the main character wanting to collect scientific data from an MIR scan on the people that had these flatline experiments? Well, she was collecting this data on a laptop, and at the end of the movie, despite the fact that none of them really bothered to do anything with this data that they were supposedly recording, at the very end of the film, they go on this bridge and they toss the laptop off into the water as some kind of tribute to the girl that died at the first girl that died that wanted all this data collected. It didn't make any sense. I mean, what was the point? Was this some kind of data that nobody should see? And, you know, that was a complete fail, because they actually showed what this data looked like. This, I guess it was supposed to be an MRI, or a magnetic resonance image scan of some kind. I don't even think that was accurate. They kind of half-assed did these scans, and I don't think that was accurate at all either. But in any case, even if you hand-wave that away and you assume that this laptop had all these imaging scans of these flat-lined people's brains, the scans didn't really show anything. Even the students remarked when they actually looked at the scans that there wasn't anything really there unusual to look at. Well, then what was the point of all this? Nothing on any level made sense. None of this made sense. Even the movie basically told the audience straight out that nothing of the original plot of scanning people's brains really added up to anything. Completely stupid, and everybody just drank themselves silly in this movie. I'm surprised they could even show up to their intern jobs, because they were spending every night just getting hammered on lick shots of alcohol, and that's how they ended the movie too, in a bar just getting hammered. And complete fail. Nothing here, nothing to see. Half a star, July 6, 2019. There really was no need for this movie to be remade. Anyone here that thinks this is a good movie and hasn't seen the original should have their head examined. I'm by no means saying the original was a great movie, but this remake or sequel is ridiculous. I think going clubbing or drinking alcohol would be the last thing I would do immediately after being brought back from death. Each time one of them gets brought back, they immediately go party. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, first thing they want to do is go out clubbing, drink themselves to death, and have sex. What was the point of all this? Couldn't they have done all that and had a lot more time to do all that partying without actually going into the basement of this hospital and killing themselves? It seems like it would have been easier to just do the partying part. And it is completely cliched. I mean, they expect us to believe that these medical interns that have like these huge long 30-hour shifts in the hospital, of which the movie shows us them having these shifts, but they've still got energy to go out clubbing and drinking themselves silly every night when they're not on duty, and they can study for exams. It's really a whole lot of nonsense thrown together. 1.5 stars, June 10th. You're better off just sticking to the original Flatliners. This reboot tries to proceed with an interesting concept, but the final product is nothing but a bunch of cheesy jump scares. Performances aren't that great, and Kiefer Sutherland cameo seems out of place. It's a shame because the movie has a very original concept and starts off decent until we see one jump scare after another. Yeah, the jump scares, I forgot how many there were. I remember 2 or 3. There were probably more, but they were just so ineffective that it didn't even do anything to me, so I forgot they were there. That's how boring they were. Let's take a look at my handy little list here. Yeah, there's a part at which it's a big deal where the character that wants to, get everybody to do these flatline experiments in the basement, she makes sure to tell everybody multiple times not to have any metal in the room because they're going to start up this scanner. But I'm sorry, they just leave their laptop there. It has plenty of metal, and they've got other metal objects around them in the room. And even though she's told them many times, watch out, you can't have metal in here when we start the scanner, everybody just ignores it and carries on anyway and does all the scans with plenty of metal around. And that's why I say the depiction of this scanning equipment, if that's what it even was, and how they use it and how it operates, I think is completely bogus because it just seems wrong to me. I'm not a medical technician, but from what I saw, it seems like this movie totally didn't know what the hell it was talking about medical machine-wise when it portrayed this whole scanning mechanism, so I don't buy it for a second. And another thing on my list, yeah, students have mental problems. Basically, the whole thing that happens is everything negative that happens in this film, it's just the students have mental problems. They have unresolved mental issues that being flatlined for 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, it brings this out and causes them to hurt themselves. And in one case, a student, he's actually kind of a rich kid, a trust fund baby type of kid, and he lives on a big boat that's docked somewhere where the other expensive boats are, and he's alone on his boat at night, and he has a hallucination about his ex-girlfriend and her aborted baby from the past that he's guilty about making her get an abortion, and he's got like a ghost sighting thing going on where he actually falls overboard and he swims to the dock, and when he tries to pull himself up at the dock, this ghost of his girlfriend appears and stabs a pocket knife through his hand into the dock, and then later he shows up with his friends at the bar and he's got his hand all bandaged up like he's actually been stabbed through the hand, and then the movie tries to give you the impression that an actual ghost did this to him, and then later it's just kind of hand waved away that they assume that he stabbed himself, but he never had a pocket knife on him, or this big knife that was shown, dagger-sized knife was shown being stabbed through his hand. It kind of just hand waves that away. You're just supposed to, fill in the details with your imagination that somehow he was swimming around with this huge knife and he stabbed himself on the dock with it. It doesn't make any sense, because if he was doing this to himself, why didn't he just stab himself inside the boat? Why did he have to fall overboard and swim to the dock first before he stabbed himself? It doesn't make any sense. A lot of stuff in this movie is just doesn't know whether it wants to show you a ghost story or it wants to show you a hallucination. It's like it went through 2/3 of its running time before the people actually producing this film knew what the hell they were going to do at the end. It's really pathetic. 2 stars, May 24, 2019. Not sure what this remake was trying to be, but it fails at it. Part of it seems like a psychological ghost thriller, and other parts seem like a medical mystery. I saw the original, and it was much more entertaining than this one. Maybe this movie falls so flat because I already knew how it would turn out. No idea why somebody would remake this. Yeah, I don't know either, because if you were going to remake this, I would think you would want to do it differently. You would want to actually turn it into some supernatural thing or take it in a different direction, because the premise by itself is interesting and it could have been done very well, but it wasn't. This is just like the worst director and the worst script writer actually tried to do this, and they just totally half-assed it, and it's like they were making it up as they went along, and it was completely pointless, and it didn't have a budget on top of it, obviously. 1.5 stars, April 30, 2019. The pacing sucks. This movie is 20 minutes too long, and you feel it at the end. Yeah, it goes on for quite a stretch at the end, and we don't get anything out of it, and it just ends with a scene of them drinking shots at a bar, and that goes on for too long, and there's really no message or anything to get out of this thing, and the music is very annoying. I'm not talking about just when they go to the club and party, which happens 2 or 3 times. I'm talking about just like the actual score of this film itself is very weird and off-putting, and it's a little too obvious, and at one point it's trying to tell you it's almost a horror film when it's not, and it doesn't work. It's just a complete fail on the score as well. 1.5 stars, April 18th, 2019. Flatliners has a decent premise where 5 medical students tries to gain insight into the afterlife by conducting experiments that triggers near-death experiences, and then it turns into a silly psychological ghost horror movie. Yeah, without the actual ghosts, unfortunately. The problem with this film is that it has 5 boring and uninteresting main characters and very unlikable characters on top of that. You'd think Ellen Page is the main character, but she isn't. Yeah, because Ellen Page, it tells us she's the main character, and then before anything else can happen, it kills her off, and then we're left with no main character. But let me continue. 4 of them need to flatline before anything else in the movie can happen, as the 5th character isn't stupid enough to kill himself. Yeah, it's like you keep seeing one character after the other volunteer to flatline, and then there's one character played by Diego Luna who's smart enough not to actually do this, and he's just there reluctantly to make sure that he can revive the other ones that are dumb enough to do this. And he's not really used as anything except the only guy that doesn't do it, and he's the only one that has any kind of common sense, and he's the only medical student among them that actually seems like he might be competent. The others are totally incompetent and should have been booted out of medical school. He's kind of likable, but he doesn't have enough role to be the main character. They could have killed off the Ellen Page's character, and they could have replaced her with Diego Luna, but they didn't do it like that. They just killed her off and left us with no sympathetic main character at all, so we didn't know what we were supposed to think was going on. April 11, well, 0.5 star. Total shame for the original movie. Yeah, and the original movie wasn't anything that spectacular anyway. It was worth watching once, but I wasn't that impressed by it in 1990. And to say that that's a lot better than this tells you how bad this really is. This is not worth watching at all. Wow, look at this one. 4.5 stars, February 19. Great updated version from the original with Kiefer Sutherland in it as well. Well, I just don't believe you, and I can't take that review serious. Don't know the motivation there, but I don't believe it at all. 2.5 stars, February 15. Interesting concept, but the second half of the movie became increasingly scarier. No, it didn't. It became increasingly more boring, because as you got closer to the end, you began to realize nothing was ever going to happen and it wasn't going to have a point at all. And it became more and more obvious as the running time increased. 2.5 stars, January 7. Wasn't as bad as the reviews say. Didn't hate it, but was far from good, 5 out of 10. Oh, it was as bad as the reviews say. It was as completely as bad as the reviews say. And let's just go back and take a look at those reviews. 4% on the tomato meter. Let's just scroll down real quick here. Critics reviews for Flatliners. Yes. Out of 76 critics, 73 call it rotten. Yeah, take a look at all those rotten ones, huh? And yeah, I think I rest my case. In this case, the critics have it right. I don't know. Maybe if the studio had bribed the critics properly, they could have given it 44%. I wouldn't doubt it, but in this case, they didn't get whatever they were, expecting from, they didn't get the Christmas gifts they were expecting from the studio. So they actually put their real opinion out there at a 4%, and I can't say I disagree with it. 33% on the audience score, that's very generous. I'm thinking 20%, that's more fair. That might still be too generous. So, I don't know. I'm going to have to call this one as totally rotten. And if you really, really want to see somebody try this premise, just watch the 1990 original. At least you'll get, younger versions of very big stars, and that might be something worth watching. And I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.